Picture the 1970s. The Cold War is at its absolute freezing point. The United States and the Soviet Union are locked in a tense standoff, racing to build the biggest nuclear bombs and the fastest spy planes. But deep inside the Pentagon, top-ranking military generals are terrified of something completely invisible. They aren't just worried about missiles, they are terrified of the human mind. Intelligence reports had started flooding in, warning that the Soviet Union was pouring massive amounts of money into a strange new field they called psychotronics. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, wrote highly classified memos expressing genuine fear that the Soviets were developing supernatural mental powers. They worried that Soviet psychics could deactivate power supplies, steal military documents, or even read the minds of American leaders. When a Los Angeles Times reporter was suddenly arrested by the KGB in Moscow in 1977 for allegedly receiving secret parapsychology documents, the US government knew they couldn't ignore this anymore. The CIA and the Pentagon panicked. They realized they were falling behind in a literal psychic arms race. Their answer to this bizarre threat? A highly classified $20 million program that would eventually be known as Project Stargate. The goal was simple, yet absolutely insane. The United States was going to build its own top-secret army of psychic spies. Now, if you're picturing fortune tellers sitting around a crystal ball, erase that from your mind. The military didn't want carnival tricks. They wanted hard science, and they wanted repeatable, measurable intelligence. To get it, the government teamed up with brilliant quantum physicists, including Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff at the prestigious Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, in California. These scientists knew they had to distance themselves from the spooky stigma of the paranormal, so they coined a brand new scientific-sounding term: remote viewing. Remote viewing was defined as the ability of a person to sit in an ordinary room and sense or see detailed information about a distant, hidden location using nothing but their mind. The military actively recruited regular soldiers, intelligence officers, and everyday civilians to see if this psychic skill could be trained like a muscle. The protocols they developed at Stanford were incredibly strict. They created two main methods to train their psychic soldiers. The first was called Coordinate Remote Viewing, or CRV. A brilliant artist and psychic named Ingo Swann helped develop this into a rigorous 6-stage training program. Here's how it worked. A viewer would be placed in a completely blank, quiet room. They would be given absolutely no context about their target, just a string of geographic coordinates like latitude and longitude. From those numbers alone, they had to start sketching the terrain, the buildings, and the secret activities happening at that exact spot, anywhere on the globe. The second method was Extended Remote Viewing, or ERV. This involved putting the subject into a deep, highly relaxed meditative trance, allowing their consciousness to freely wander into enemy territory without leaving their chair. It sounds exactly like the plot of a science fiction movie, but the military treated it with deadly seriousness. And here's the part that will make your jaw drop. Sometimes it actually worked. Let me introduce you to a man named Joe McMoneagle. Joe was an Army veteran who had been severely injured in a helicopter crash in Vietnam, but he went on to become the absolute superstar of the Stargate program. Inside the intelligence community, he was literally known as Remote Viewer #1. Joe possessed an uncanny, almost terrifying ability to close his eyes and travel across the globe. In one of his most famous, fully declassified missions, Joe was tasked to look into a heavily guarded Soviet facility near the Arctic Ocean. Sitting thousands of miles away in a dark room in Maryland, Joe sketched out a massive, heavily modified building. But he didn't just see a warehouse, he described a colossal, state-of-the-art, nuclear-powered missile submarine that the Soviets were secretly constructing right inside of it. He even drew the specific angled missile tubes. Intelligence analysts thought he was completely crazy. The building was way too far from the water for a submarine to make any sense. But months later, satellite photos captured the Soviets dredging a massive canal and rolling out the exact Typhoon-class submarine that Joe had drawn. He was dead right.
For his unbelievable psychic intelligence work, the military actually awarded Joe McMoneagle the prestigious Legion of Merit. Let that sink in for a second. The United States Army pinned an official medal on a man for psychic spying. But Joe wasn't the only psychic weapon in the Pentagon's arsenal. Enter Pat Price, a former police officer who became one of Stanford's absolute psychic treasures. In June 1974, the CIA really wanted to test Pat's limits. They gave him the coordinates to a highly classified Soviet research and development facility in Semipolsk, Siberia. Pat sat in his chair, closed his eyes, and began to speak to his handlers. He said, "I am lying on top of a building and the sun feels good. There is a giant gantry crane rolling back and forth over my head." He described the crane as so massive that it ran on huge steel tracks on either side of a building, leaving deep impressions in the dirt. He even sketched out the bizarre, specific proportions of this machine. Now, remember, Pat was just a guy from California sitting in a secure room, but the CIA analysts looking at his sketches were absolutely stunned. His drawings were remarkably close in detail to the actual gantry crane operating at this secret Soviet nuclear facility, a site known in classified files as URDF-3. Pat Price had literally projected his mind across the world, bypassing heavily armed guards and electric fences to look at a top-secret weapons site with his psychic eyes. As the years went on, the project didn't just stop at spying on the Russians. These remote viewers were tasked to locate American hostages kidnapped by terrorist groups, track the paths of fugitive criminals, and find downed aircraft. In one incredible instance, a remote viewer was asked to locate a crashed Soviet Tu-95 bomber that had gone down somewhere in the massive jungles of Africa. The psychic allegedly pinpointed the wreckage within just a few miles of its actual location. But things got even weirder. The intelligence agencies decided to push the boundaries of reality to see if remote viewing could transcend not just space itself, but time itself. In 1984, in a now famous declassified CIA transcript, a handler gave a remote viewer a sealed envelope containing coordinates and a specific era, the planet Mars 1 million years BC. The viewer, while in a deep trance, began describing a dusty, dying planet. He reported seeing megalithic structures, giant, smooth pyramids, and even tall, thin beings waiting in a state of suspended animation for an environmental disaster to pass. The CIA was literally using psychics to time travel to ancient Mars. Whether you believe the vision was real or just a wild hallucination, the fact that an official U.S. intelligence agency conducted, recorded, and filed this session shows just how far down the rabbit hole the government was willing to go. For nearly 20 years, the United States government poured $20 million into Project Stargate, running these operations out of a leaky old wooden barracks at Fort Meade. So what happened to this legendary army of psychics? In 1995, the CIA commissioned a review of the program. The official report concluded that remote viewing had never produced actionable, reliable intelligence, stating the information was often vague or included erroneous data. Following this review, Project Stargate was officially terminated and the documents were declassified. The government essentially closed the book, telling the public, "Nothing to see here, folks. It was all a waste of time and taxpayer money." But critics, researchers, and former remote viewers strongly disagree with this neat little conclusion. They point to the 150 targets Joe McMoneagle accurately described. They point to the detailed sketches of Soviet cranes, and most importantly, they ask a very logical question. If the program was a complete and utter failure, why did the Pentagon and the CIA keep funding it, defending it, and using it for 20 straight years? Were the successes of Project Stargate just lucky guesses and coincidences, or did the U.S. military briefly unlock the hidden supernatural potential of the human mind? The documents are out there, declassified for anyone to read, but the true limits of human consciousness? That remains the greatest mystery of all. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's bizarre truths, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you think remote viewing is real, or was the CIA just chasing ghosts? See you in the next video.